And we will move to number 9, small district and charter school funding, presented by Sam Uri, our school finance director, and Dale Frost, our minimum school program coordinator.
Chair, if I may.
Yes, Deputy Superintendent Jones.
Yes, so we're, in the interest of time, we're going to go just really fast here. I was going to make some opening remarks, but I'll just turn it right over to Sam to introduce it. And Del Frost has all of the technical calculations that we may need. So with that, if Sam, you'll just summarize what the action item is we're requesting here.
So basically what this proposal does, and we want to make it clear that as staff, we're not advocating for any specific course of action, but what this does is for any LEA under 2,000 students enrolled, it gets them up to $150 per student on base funding. So there already exists a base for very, very small LEA charter schools of $40,000, but this would raise the funding for any charter LEA under 2,000 students enrolled to at least 150 students as part of the small school base funding business case. With that, happy to answer any questions, take any feedback.
Thank you. Member Davis.
I'd like to make a motion. You haven't heard it yet.
It's going to be good.
It's 4 o'clock.
I just lost my internet, so. Yeah. I move that the USBE request an increase of $3,293,005. Is there an action item? No. For small charter school base funding.
Second.
I need to say it a little differently, but I just lost my internet.
Let's let you get the language. The business case is small district and charter school funding.
I'd like to
What's the
speak to
motion?
it, and then you can tell me if I need to adjust the motion.
Okay, the motion's been made. There was a second, Member Hymas. So it's only for charter. So back to Chair Davis, or Member Davis, if you'd like to speak to the motion.
Okay, so really, we looked overall at small district and charter school funding. We've already voted on this. It came out of Finance Committee for an $8,300,000, I believe, if I remember correctly. But what we found out later, as the numbers came rolling in, the goal was to try to get back to the $100 per student for administration costs for our charter schools. And by the way, that cost has not changed in 20 years. So I think that just needs to be known. But because of the different numbers and growth that came in, it actually only got us to about $94 average for our charter school administrative costs. So this is rectifying that, or at least making a change to get us back up to that 100 average. And then it's taking a look at the charter schools that have less than 2,000 students and making the admin funding more commensurate to our small district LEAs that have also less than 2,000 students. They have on average about $158 per student, and our charters have about $100 per student. And for our small ones, less than 2,000, without the economy of scale, it's it's quite a big difference. So we're trying to get a little more similar there.
Thank you, Member Davis. Member Norton and then Member Straight.
Yeah, I'd like to speak against this motion. I have two questions that I'd like to ask. First of all, we've been talking about respecting the procedure, but, you know, this does kind of come from left field. We started meeting in May about the dollar amounts on this, and we had one set and voted on it, and now, you know, here we are at the last, you know, the midnight hour, making a change to that. Secondly, I really am concerned about the change in and of itself. You know, for the past whole year and most recently, as of today, you know, we heard this morning, we are in an economic tailspin. You know, we've got recession, we've got inflation, we've got the major ending of the COVID money that everybody has become so accustomed to. We have flat growth. You know, when we're talking about maybe 90 students, and that's on a you know, hopeful, that's flat growth. That's 0% growth, and yet we're asking for more money. I also, you know, it's not like charters have not had any money. The local replacement funding has gone up 30% in the last 4 years. So I think that the legislature, they are not going to want to see more ongoing funds. We have other places, if we had money for more ongoing funds, that we could put them. And I really would love to make everything fair in the world, but it's not. And we're trying the best we can. But, you know, I'm hearing, oh, we want to do, you know, more here, more there. Well, there's going to have to be a whole bunch of no's said this year. And I think this might be a place where we start.
Thank you, Member Norton.
It's a 60% increase on those small schools. I mean, it's 59% increase.
Thank you. Member Straight.
Yes, I guess I'm trying to understand a little bit about the genesis of this, because the insinuation that I'm getting when I read this is that somehow charter schools were not treated equally with small districts. What was the genesis of the original numbers? And yeah, help me understand that.
Deputy Jones or Dale Frost?
Chair, if I may,
Please.
Dale Frost, MSP Administrator. So I will give you the cliff notes on the history of this. So there used to be an admin funding program for districts and an admin funding program for charters.
But that's, when you say admin, that doesn't mean principals and
No.
superintendents. That means,
This is a state-level program to support administrative costs.
okay,
If that helps. It was about $5 million on the district side, $8 million on the charter side. When COVID hit, and the uncertainty of the budget picture, there was a time where we thought maybe there'd be $1 billion budget deficit. Luckily, that didn't materialize, but you know, the state took a very prudent approach. They trimmed that down to, rather than a $13 million program, to a $5 million program across both. And so a lot of medium-sized, you know, rural districts got cut completely from that program, and only the very smallest were mostly held harmless. It is true that on a per-student basis, districts from this program do receive more than charters do. It is also true, as Board Member Norton said, that charters have received an increase in the local replacement funding, which is a separate program. But yeah, so what the $8.6 million does is it largely holds harmless the old formula until we come up with a better replacement, and it's one-time funds. But we cannot cover the $100 per student because of growth in the number of charters. They get a base. So they are getting about $94 per student right now. And so that's not even the $100 that was there before COVID. And obviously, inflation has gone up. But so there are both factors there. And this is only one piece of overall funding. We have to keep that in mind. But hopefully that gives you some idea on the funding. And so, yeah, most of this funding has been a one-time basis until we come up with a more permanent solution. And the current business case is to continue that one-time Band-Aid. And that's what's in there right now. And I believe the request is to increase that one-time request by $3.3 million to increase for those LEAs that are less than 2,000. Now, districts already are getting the $150 per student or more from this program. Charters are not. They're at the 94, if that helps.
Okay, so,
Does that answer the question? Was that from
yeah, so.
Member
it-
Straight? Go ahead.
It's formulaic, what's going on here, but it's within each program, small districts versus charter schools, those monies are divided out, and then it's divvied out based on, from there, based on the formula as far as it goes. Okay, so in balance, local replacement dollars, as was brought up by Board Member Norton, if you balance this into the equation, and maybe there's other things as well, is there still an inequity that needs to be rectified, or do we know that?
Chair, if I may answer that
Please,
question.
yes.
It is a difficult question to answer because charter school local replacement is based on a formula that tries to approximate the local property taxes that school districts get to support their students. And so as the local property taxes have gone up, that's what's driven the charter school local replacement. And so, yes, that the increase in local replacement more than makes up for this if you're talking about a $700 increase and we're talking about a $50 increase, trying to put that in perspective. However, districts are receiving more local revenues through property taxes. It's not uniform across the board, and that's the hard part. There are probably some districts that are receiving a lot more, and there are some districts that are receiving less. And so, you know, is this, I can say, does this improve equity in this program across them? Probably yes. Is it a Band-Aid still? Probably yes. Do they need it? That's a very hard question to answer. I'm trying to be fair on this, it's, you know, and not try to come across one way or the other. Hopefully that kind of gets you an answer to your
Yes.
question.
I think we all want to be fair. I think that's the bottom line. Although I do want to point out, average and median are two different things. I don't find the $158 per student, if you're going to use a mathematical understanding of the word median, that doesn't mean anything to me, because if you look down that chart, some of your larger districts that still get funding even before they don't get funding, they're receiving, you know, in the 40s dollars per student, because they're a larger district and we have this part of the formula. And so I'm having a hard time coming exactly to an understanding of what is fair, because this $158 median doesn't mean anything to me mathematically.
Deputy, well, either one, and I do want to move on. We've got
Well,
that's
several
right.
lights,
If
but
I may,
I
Chair,
think we've
real
got the
quick.
follow-up question posed, and
Ye-
Deputy Jones or
Yes,
Dale
sir.
Frost?
I think it's important to note what Dell had reported initially too, was that it's maybe it was Sam, 2,000 student count. So we're really trying, you know, we try to base it on, that was really the key comparison, right? Was the number of students being served with that, for whatever that's worth to that. We were trying to not differentiate, but keep consistent with an apples to apples comparison on the number of students that were served. So there would be some charter schools that would not see this, right? And there, yeah, and there, you know, so anyway,
Member
very
Lear?
few,
Oh,
but.
sorry.
Yeah, go ahead.
Chair, if I may
Dale and then Member
respond,
Lear.
the
Yes.
spread amongst districts is wide.
Yeah.
And the reason why we didn't use average is because a lot of districts, the larger ones, don't receive any. And we don't want that to, you know, so we were looking at those who did receive. And if you compare, we try to compare apples to apples to the extent possible. And it's really challenging because, you know, charter with 1,000 students is very different than a district with 1,000 students. But at least in this program, districts that have 2,000 students or less are all receiving above $150. I think the lowest is 153 or something, and most are in the 170, 180 range. The very smallest districts are receiving quite a bit, but they need that just to support their lack of economies of scale.
Thank you, Dale. We got Member Lear, then Member Bogus, and then I think
Okay,
might have somebody remote.
I feel like a little bit of a bait and switch. All of a sudden, this was districts and small districts and charter schools, which I supported. It's a little bit of a co-option, but okay, I supported it. Now I feel like it's just charter schools. And so that concerns me, unless you misspoke, Member Davis, in your emotion. Was it supposed to be both? Was it supposed to be?
3 million does it.
Chair, may I?
Hey,
Can I
Member
ask-
Davis, yes, please.
It is both. It was both coming out of committee, and it is both with what the board has already voted on with the 8,600,000, not 300,000, as I stated earlier. So I want to make that correction. But where we found the enrollment numbers were different from what we had when we made the number was in the charter category. And we actually thought we were getting that $100 per student on average, and it ended up being only 94. So that correction is part of this overall formula. But yes, it is true, while we're looking at correcting that formula, we started looking at what was being given across the board. And to your point, Member Straight, I mean, it's never going to be, just the way the formulas are, it's never going to be equal. But by and large, if you look at these LEAs that are under 2,000, the charter schools for the reporting burden are getting significantly less than similarly sized, more rural LEAs. And I just want to note that all of this, I think, is going to change, because remember, we commissioned with the legislature the West Ed study to look at rural district funding. And there are a lot of recommendations that are coming out of the rural district funding. That's small LEAs, but did not include charter schools. And so what we have to do now over the next year is take what we learned from this whole rural small district funding study and parlay what we can into the charter school space, so that we will, in effect, be looking at long-term solutions for this kind of reporting burden, both for our rural small district schools and for our charter schools. So this is a one-time only stopgap request. And yes, there is more local replacement funds, but there's also more local property tax dollars. So it's just all the way around, but this is a one-time only stopgap.
And
That's
I had
what
a-
this
and I
is.
had a
Member
follow-up.
Lear, follow
And
up?
I'll do it as quickly as I can. How many charters, I don't have all the backup stuff right in front of me. So how many, it seems like almost all the charters are fewer than 2,000 students. How many of the 130-ish?
Deputy or Dale
And
Frost?
an estimate is fine. Is it 100?
Yeah, there are only 5 or 6 charters that are above that
So
2,000.
that's all charters, essentially, one point. And the districts aren't included in this. And the other thing that I am troubled by is, why is it settling on the agenda? Why didn't it go through finance like a regular request? And there was a full discussion in the committee, and then it would come to the board. I feel like this is sort of a stealth, and maybe it's not. Maybe I'm just feeling that, like, this is what I feel is the nose under the camel's tent. Or the camel's nose under the tent, let me put it that way.
I
So
might,
help me with that tent problem and camel problem.
Member
tell me
Lear,
I'm wrong.
procedurally, I might respond to that. We discussed it in the leadership committee and then executive
just
committee.
came on the agenda?
The question, well, the discussion was, if we're going to do this, does it need to be in queue before PEA starts meeting? And ultimately, the decision was have a vote on it. Members could choose, but don't wait until after. And the reason it was delayed is, when it came out of committee, we thought the West Ed study might tell us more about small districts, and then that might be used for charters. It didn't give us time for either. So that's the procedural background. And so the question was, given this data, do we amend? And so we brought it to the board, and it's now here for discussion,
Right,
and
and I guess that explanation would work for a lot of items that would be, we'd rather deal with sooner rather than later and not work through the committee process. So I'm not particularly persuaded, I just feel it's kind of an ambush. So I would oppose it, similar to our previous discussion, because it's not been fully reviewed by a committee as they should, and I'm sympathetic to most all charters. Why don't we just say it's all but 3 charters, instead of saying it's less than 2,000 students? I just feel like that's kind of misleading too.
Okay,
Maybe not
we've got-
intentional, but that's how I feel.
fair enough. Let's move through other, I think we had Ms. Member Bogus.
I actually changed my mind. I have no questions at this time. Thank you, Carol. You did a very good job.
And I think we have a Vice Chair Earl.
Yeah, I think this is a responsible decision. You're talking about, we're not talking about charters and districts. We're talking about public schools in the state of Utah. And I do think that the West Ed study did not provide the information that we were hoping. We're talking about a one-time, this is not ongoing. And I think when we're talking about true equity and the cost associated with just the things, the reporting requirements and other things that administratively have to be done, this is one of those things that helps benefit small schools in Utah. And I think it's a responsible and a smart thing to do. It's needed to get that on there in the next coming week in order to have the discussion about it. Anyways, I think this is the direction to go. I would strongly encourage you to vote for it.
Thank you. Back to Member Davis.
I'll just say, procedurally, this is not unprecedented where we haven't amended amounts of our legislative asks. The whole legislative ask went through committee. Granted, the piece that needs to be fixed would have just come in as an amendment anyway. But the new piece, adding for the schools below 2,000, that is a new idea and conceptually could have gone through committee. However, when you look across the board, I mean, it just makes sense to make those more similar.
Thank you. Member Norton, did you still have a?
I do still have a comment. If we're looking for fair, then that means that we need to reduce that local replacement fund down to about 20%, because that's what the property tax has been doing. So no, this is not a fair, you get this and we get this. It's something that, it's the formulas that we've got. We don't have West Ed, we can't be throwing around this little, that little, because, for every piece of data, we've got a different piece of data. And I think that, again, let's get the information from West Ed. Let's get our information, put together our formula, fix it next year when we've got it. But again, this is a bad year to be nickel and dime in the legislature. And it's not nickels and dimes, it's $3 million.
It's one time, but I think, Deputy Jones, did you have a light on to speak, or?
Oh, no,
Member
we just
Straight
need-
has
I'm
a
sorry.
comment. Member Straight?
I'm really torn because I'm hearing so many different things that I'm trying to think through, and we brought up the West Ed study. When these formulas were originally put in, they were considered fair. Things have changed. This is a one-year, one-time change. Things will change next year. I feel like I still need more information, so it's difficult, but yeah.
Could I
thank you.
turn that to Deputy Jones? Is there anything else about the questions on parity or funding for small districts versus small charters to address before we vote?
Not at this time, sir, no.
All right.
Not that I can think of.
Okay, thank you. And I'll just add, I think our staff looked as well as they could to find apples to apples. The question is whether we support these small, less than 2,000 districts and charters. There was a look done at small districts to see whether that needed to be increased, and it looked like it was roughly a parity. So those were the numbers that were given to us, and we brought it before the full board so that we have a decision before it goes to PEA and we don't change midstream. And other items, of course, that are legislative, proposals will come to us each week. That'll be part of that process. But I think we have no further questions or comments, so the motion on the table is the Finance Committee recommends that the Utah State Board of Education request an increase of 3 million.
Point of order, that's not the
Excuse me.
motion.
Let's get the right
Yeah,
motion up
we
there.
just need to get the right
Do we
language.
have the,
No.
no, I'm sorry, you're right. I was going off the, I'm sorry. I was, there we go. Board Member Davis's motion is that the board request an increase of $3,293,005 to the small charter school base funding amount,
Including,
including the amount already approved for small district and charter school funding.
I think what we need is including the language for the 2,000. So that's differentiated, because this
For-
isn't just going to be,
Correct. Schools of 2,000 or less students. Charter schools of 2,000 or less, the districts are. Do we
yes,
have? well,
but there's
let's see what we
also
have
the
up here.
correction
Let's see if we
piece
got-
for all charters that takes it from the 94 to back to the 100, which was originally intended. So how we write that
We're-
to
we're-
make sure
we're
it's
catching
right.
up. Sorry, Sybil. So it might be that the board requests an increase in the small district and charter school funding business case of, so that we know what we're amending. Small charter, small district and charter school funding business case. Right, correct. So I think we'll get that correct here. Of, there we go, $3,000 to the small charter school-based funding amount for charter schools with 2,000 or less. Before I read that as the official motion for vote, let's make sure that reads correctly. That look right, Chair Davis? Or whatever, it's just, it's an amendment to what was previously approved.
We just need to then get the piece in to amend the average amount. We need to fix that 94, 100.
That's the basis for the number. Was that in the motion itself, Cindy, or Member Davis?
Add that in? Sorry, we do not need to add that in, because with these calculations, I think we come out with an average, but some are going to be at 94 and some are going to be a little above, correct? Just the ones over 2,000. So we don't need to add that other part in, we just need to put this in. That's what I'm hearing.
All right, does that accurately state the motion?
Chair, if I may respond to the motion.
Please.
The dollars are needed and the direction on where those dollars need to go, which is LEAs fewer than 2,000 students. So charter schools with 2,000 or fewer students, because that's how the math works out. That, I believe, is sufficient to update to the calculation, which is what, it'll get to the $150 per student. It will not. So the calculations as they stand do not affect any LEA above 2,000, and that includes charters above 2,000. So they're still at the 94. That's the 3.293 million. It would cost more to add those. It wouldn't be a large amount more, but it's not included in the 3.29 million. I apologize, board member.
That's okay. I just misunderstood that.
Does that look like we have the language that we need then? Or that expresses the intent of the motion? Yes, bless you. Is there a question, or do we have
Christina has
clarity on what Member Bogus?
Oh, I just wanted to clarify, is this money coming out of the budget surplus or is it coming out of the next legislative allocation?
So that's completely up to the legislature. We just make the request and then they determine where the funding source is. It's one-time money, so, none of us can commit the legislature to where precisely that money will come from. ma'am.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, yes, ma'am.
Do we have guidance on one-time money availability currently? Do we know?
To the extent of that, there's 1.1 billion of one-time funding available to the whole state of Utah. We do not specifically know how much one-time money is available to public education at this time.
Got it.
The 1.1 billion though, sir, and this is really important going into the session, of that amount, 1 billion is education fund or income tax fund, 100 million is general fund.
Right. Okay. Member Davis, can I just make sure before I read this that we've got the language accurately? Does that look right?
I mean, based on the numbers we have before us, it does. It does what we're looking to do for the LEAs less than 2,000 and make those more consistent. It doesn't change the 9,400, but you've got disparity all over the board with districts too on that. So maybe we'd move forward with this.
We'll watch for the West Ed. Okay, so the motion is from Member Davis that the board requests an increase to the small district and charter school funding business case of $8.6 million by an additional $3.293005 to be distributed to charter schools with less than 2,000 students. Members in favor, please raise your hand. Okay, so that motion passes. Thank you. We got you, all those opposed, raise your hand if you'd like. We got you down on the record, but, all right. Got it, okay.
All that stands between us and a break.